To my great-great-grandchildren, you may not know who I am, but I am your great-great-grandfather, and the world that you currently live in is the result of decisions and choices which I made in my own life. And whilst I don't know what your world is like now, I wanted to share with you how my world changed and the planet suddenly pivoted on March 2020. Prior to that, most of us lived a fairly free and easy existence. Yes, we were bought and sold by credit and the desire to achieve and do better than our fellow man. But it was largely all taken away in one fell swoop, in an event that completely altered the direction for many people. Many lives were altered irreparably. There was a 2 to 3 year period after March 2020 where we saw destruction of businesses and families, communities and people, and even nations brought to their knees in an event that never needed to happen. For the most part, some of us would resist, but many would go quietly into that good night. They would simply not understand. As I did my own research, it became clear to me there was a far deeper reason for why these events had occurred and why they had to occur. And I want you to know that we did our absolute best, given the information we had at the time. We were unaware that we were about to go through the biggest monetary reset in modern history, the likes of which we hadn't heard of since March 6, 1933, nearly 100 years earlier. But now it was our turn. We had our events that took place after March 2020, and then the big one, the greatest financial reset, which was designed to bring together a whole range of different mechanisms. We would see war in the Middle East against a superpower known as the United States. That was desperate not to lose its status as the world reserve currency, a status which it had held since 1944. This nation would threaten nations that were looking to join a new group known as the BRICS group. Nations such as Argentina and Saudi Arabia would falter. They wouldn't join the group, which meant that the United States dollar, the world reserve currency, could survive for just a little bit longer. But the wars involved the greatest commodity on the earth, which was oil. As the central bank systems of the world funded corporations, globalists and governments to achieve their ultimate outcome, which was an agenda at the time termed Agenda 2030. They would float out the usual actors to redirect public thinking. And to a certain degree, it worked. We saw elections that were rigged. We saw globalists that told us untruths. We were threatened with everything from pandemics to the loss of everything we would ever own. It was our fault that the climate was neither hot nor cold. None of us knew what was wrong with the climate. It wasn't apparent to anybody. All we knew is we would have to pay for it. The monetary systems would eventually collapse. And our central bankers and our governments would use the cover of war and the loss of huge amounts of life to take all property from the people. This was the greatest catastrophe that we had ever known. Suddenly, no one had anything. All property had been taken by those that had the funds and the money, the central bankers. The rest of us struggled to understand, in the confusion of war, the confusion of rapid climate change, which we were being blamed for, and this incredible technology known as central bank digital currencies, which would come eventually to save our day, together with something the government would offer everybody that had lost everything, a universal basic income. Most people went for it, believing that this was the saviour. But as we had seen in March 2020, it turns out that the governments and the globalists, together with the central bankers, really didn't have the best interests of the people. So we began to use this central bank digital currency, pretending all the while that we could somehow be wealthy. Those that had protected themselves across the reset, they did okay. No one was unscathed. Everybody was damaged in some way financially, from the lowest classes to the highest classes. But at least those who had foreplanned were forewarned. And those that had diversified were able to survive, in part. We then lived to find that the assets and property that we had taken from us were then sold back to us as digital tokens on a blockchain. We found ourselves inside a matrix, a system which was designed and built in 2022, a long time before you were ever born. This system was the digital twin system, and you will no doubt know about it because it'll be part of your world. It underpins everything. This system was designed to incorporate carbon credits, the social credit scores, central bank digital currencies, and just about everything that would bring down the common man, control, track and trace. And then we saw the introduction of the digital twin healthcare system, which began monitoring people from the inside using sensors which were largely installed in 2021 following a program that was the result of the events of 2020. These sensors formed an operating system and interacted with the current 5G and 6G grid. Smart grids with cameras on every street lamp, smart lighting systems that were communicating with the free energy grid. This was our lives. We were in total confusion for the best part of several decades. It began in 2020 and it continued for many, many years after that. To have any wealth in that kind of system was virtually impossible. People had largely turned to the private digital asset space, and those that understood would trade tokens for assets which they once owned. Ownership of property was something that we would never see again after 2030. This was our life, and your world is a result of the decisions which we made. And I want you to know that We did our level best to understand the white papers of these corporations. But these papers were written in languages that were very difficult to understand. It may be commonplace in your world to know about blockchain and the different versions of cryptos. It may be commonplace to use central bank digital currencies. You may be tracked and traced, and you may not even hear this message without it being totally edited by AI. But I want you to know we did our best, and that is the point of my message. Whatever your world is currently like, that your great-great-grandfather and many people that he knew, who are long gone now, we did our best. Make good choices.